Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Amy MacFarlane. She's the founder and CEO at Recreational Respite. Amy, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think you're doing something kind of really cool and innovative in kind of the social entrepreneurial space, and I think that's really cool, and I think kind of inspiring to other people that are looking to do something similar, maybe in a social space kind of in their lives. But maybe before we kind of get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure. Yeah. So I was born and raised in Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Okay.
I spent most of my childhood there. My teen years were then out in the suburbs of, the greater Toronto area
Sure.
still. And then I left school, traveled the world for a few years to kind of figure out what and who I was. Don't know that I really figured that out in all my travels, but it sure was fun.
No, I'm sure. That's all that matters, right? At that point.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, learned a lot about other people, and I think that's where my fascination started for social work, like social enterprise kind of work, social services to serve others, and that kind of thing. So the experience of travel and diversity,
Sure.
right, and cultural aspects were really, I was always fascinated by that. So traveled a bit, came home, settled down, did the whole, got married, had kids.
Sure.
And then when my daughter was 4 months old, I started my company, Recreational Respite, and my son was 3. So it was really busy times, probably not the greatest time to start a business, but it seemed like a good idea at the time.
No, that's fair. I think the interesting thing, and I have 2 kids myself, and I find that now I'm obviously busier like yourself, but I live and die by a calendar and I make time for things. So I actually probably accomplish more now that I'm busier than I did in my 20s when I was just kind of playing video games or whatever in the evenings and on weekends. So
yeah, I totally understand that.
So that's funny. But you went to kind of a bunch of universities. Do you want to walk me and the listener through kind of your, university, college kind of career?
Yeah. So it wasn't traditional, to say the least. I did not go to school in sort of a 4-year term,
Sure.
One-time sort of setting. I kind of broke it up. I didn't go back. I did some college courses in a diploma program just after I'd gotten back from traveling the world. And I happened to be in the IT space at that time when internet web server certificates had become a thing where you could start to do online banking. So I was part of a very critical turning point in the IT world. So I was so far from from healthcare at that time. But it was a sort of a trip to a hospital, and I had seen some bedside manner and some professionals in the hospital setting that said, hey, I don't belong in front of the computer with my personality. I really want to work with people and serve people. So I ended up going back to university and doing courses kind of here and there because I also had my newborn son at the
Sure.
time as well. So I was kind of managing that whole thing, getting on the subway, going to school at Ryerson, doing some courses at McMaster in Hamilton. And then finally, quite a few years passed,
Sure.
and finally had completed some health science work, specialized in some of my placement time and part-time work in ortho rehab, neuro rehab, and complex mental health. And I really started to love that. So I started to finally find a path of going into healthcare and identifying more of what I wanted to do ultimately long-term, which was to serve individuals who had a variety of needs, really.
Sure. No, but I think that's kind of inspiring in itself because I think some people, at least that I've met over the years, are so scared to go back to school, even if it's part-time or a night course or full-time, or it doesn't really matter. Post once they have kids, right? And I think
Yeah.
That's inspiring that you did that, and then you kind of built a startup and then a social startup on top of that. I think that's really inspiring to people. So let's kind of get into the company more, and what made you decide to kind of found Recreational Respite?
So I had been experiencing different things over the course of my younger years, as most of us do, the loss of grandparents, the loss of friends in school, all of these sort of traumatic and tragic events. And I remember always thinking about the sadness of the lost individual, but what about their families? Like, where do they go from here? How do they reintegrate back into the community? How do they go back to work, like after they lose their daughter, their son? I mean, in my high school, we had quite a few deaths in our graduating year, from like anything from drunk driving to boat accidents to just recklessness, wow. Right? And I remember thinking, like, this can't be normal, like there can't be this many kids 18 years of age that are losing their lives every summer. But, as you grow up, you realize that these things happen, right?
Sure, yeah.
So this tragedy was kind of around me, and I realized that, like, I just really, really cared. I really, really gave a care about these families and how they were coping. Like, where do they go from here, sure. Really, ultimately? And my cousin also had some disabilities that kind of went undiagnosed until she was closer to 27.
Oh, wow.
Because my own family was going through lots of their own denial. And really just no knowledge as to how to navigate the system to find out what was going on with her. Sure. The school system had failed them. The community system had failed them. There was no services in place like we have now, 27 years ago, from now, right. Even. So we've come a long way. But when I started doing my placement hours as a personal support worker, because that's kind of where I started,
sure.
I started to really see the recreation therapists and how they were engaging with patients. And their role was to identify ways to engage someone who'd been affected by these major traumas. In some cases, they were motor vehicle accidents. And these, young and old patients had to be reintegrated into society.
Sure.
And the rec therapists took on those roles. And that to me was fascinating because they were doing it through avenues of recreation and leisure. They weren't doing it through avenues of medical models, right? They weren't doing it through, we're going to fix your legs so that you can walk again, which is all very critical, don't get me wrong. But I just loved the fact that they were looking at this holistic person going, what did they enjoy? What's their sense of worth, their role, their purpose? How do we identify that? And then how do we use that as a tool to integrate them successfully back into their communities, their families, their work life, their school life, whatever it may be?
Sure.
So that's the start of Recreational Respite, was working as a PSW and understanding that recreation and leisure was so much more important than I had ever imagined. I mean, the psychosocial needs of an individual is critical, right?
Sure. Totally.
Without connectivity, without accessibility, without being included, we have so many mental health concerns.
Sure.
So you can only imagine those that are already coming to us with those challenges. How do we get them, active in the community?
No, I 100% agree. And I think it seems to be kind of at the forefront a little bit more, and kind of the media and the general public are kind of, seems like being more and more aware of kind of different kind of issues that kind of come up with people and kind of disabilities and kind of accessibility. Everything seems to kind of be at the forefront now. And I know Bell kind of across Canada runs like a mental health day. And Bell, for people that don't know what that is, they're just like a cell phone carrier in Canada. And so there's a lot, I think there's a lot of even kind of big name companies kind of trying to promote it as well. Have you found that at least, or do you agree with that?
So here's a bit of a funny twist in my story. In along the path of my own existence of recreational respite and having a family and building business, and fast forward many years later, I experienced my own trauma and loss of my own partner.
Okay.
And so when we started to talk about things like Let's Talk, I really started to become even more passionate and more of an advocate for Let's Talk every day. So for me, this really drove that passion and advocacy to do more about having people understand that mental health is an issue that every day, and as a survivor of losing someone to mental health, I know how important it is to remember them every day.
Sure.
So, I think the campaigns have good intentions. I think they're important for those that aren't exposed, and thank God that they're not, right? I mean, this isn't something you wish for people to experience, definitely. But yeah, I mean, there needs to be more around such things instead of end the stigma. Let's educate. People need to be educated about what it means, what mental health is,
Sure.
and how do we interact and engage with these individuals who do have mental health. So we're not talking about stigma anymore. We're building inclusive environments. That's really what we need to be doing.
Sure. And the other
On a
thing...
big scale.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. No, on a bigger scale. That's
Sure.
all. That's all I wanted to say. Yeah.
But I think you guys kind of do more than just kind of mental health stuff as well. And one of the main reasons I really wanted to have you on the show is just getting people to think about kind of accessibility in their kind of apps and their software and in their hardware and kind of just in their daily lives, because it's something that's kind of come across my desk on certain projects over the years. And it's always kind of been fascinating to me to actually kind of use the internet, for example, as somebody with a different disability, or, you watch somebody use a screen reader or a joystick or kind of stuff like that. And, like Apple and Google are doing a decent job. I think Apple kind of better than Google, and they're kind of playing a bit of catch up on kind of accessibility. But you watch somebody that with like a certain disability use an iPhone with the accessibility stuff, they can do a lot, and that I never even would have kind of thought about or like a...
Yep.
Right. And so you're kind of doing a startup to help people with these kind of different disabilities and kind of in the accessibility space. But then, you're also kind of an entrepreneur. So it's kind of this like interesting kind of angle that you're coming at the kind of space with. Right. And I think it's interesting to maybe dive a little bit deeper into all the other kind of things that you guys do.
Yeah. For sure. So, I mean, recreational respite, basically when we started out, we were developing one-to-one services. So our recreation therapist, which actually is a university degree. It's a 4-year university degree program. And then after that, they specialize in different areas: children, youth, adults, older adults, psychogeriatrics, etc., mental health, and so forth. So our programs started with a recreation therapist, which actually was me, meeting with clients one-to-one, and mostly they were seniors, a lot of them with Alzheimer's. And so the goal was to identify ways to make their respite more meaningful. So they were having, care workers come in that were helping them with activities of daily living, bathing, showering, cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing, but they weren't stimulating them. And stimulating and engaging them can help deter from some of the negative behaviors, from the decline in health, the conditions changes, of course. If you think about this in your own way, when we're healthy, we can do anything we want. We can make a decision to go for a run. We can make a decision not to. We can make a decision to do whatever we want. When we have those inabilities because of impairment or challenge or disease or disorder, we don't engage, right? Therefore, we're not reaching our full potential as individuals. Therefore, we start to lose our sense of role, our worth, our purpose. Like, for example, if you and I were sick and we couldn't go out for 8 weeks because we've got broken feet, right? That's debilitating. It's very debilitating. The only thing that pushes us forward is knowing that in 8 weeks from now, our feet will be better and we'll be able to make those choices again for ourselves.
Sure.
So that's where we started, was one-to-one services working with older adults. That quickly evolved into working with children and youth because, of course, we have a large number of individuals with autism, with other intellectual and developmental disabilities as well. And so now we're a full service for children, youth, adults that range in the needs of autism to depression to post-traumatic stress disorder, to Alzheimer's, and to complex mental health. So
Sure.
anyone that has an inability to engage or participate in their community would be someone that we would work with.
Sure.
And we work on specific goals. So that's our service base started there.
Got you.
Then we started to realize that these individuals really wanted an opportunity to come together in a group setting for more of an inclusive opportunity.
Yep.
So we started to develop group programs within our own client base.
Okay.
So we would form programs anywhere from computer classes to art classes to photography classes to cooking classes to Lego groups to you name it, based on the needs of the individuals, based on their abilities, based on their interests, and based on their geographic location.
Sure.
And we would host these small groups in a variety of neighborhoods. And the groups would be as small as 5 and as big as 8, no bigger than that.
Okay.
Because we still ultimately wanted to work towards goals for everyone that was within that group. Okay, so the same thing as our one-to-one service, but in a group setting, so that they were getting the other social aspect of the benefits of the therapy.
Sure.
That quickly started to evolve with partnerships of not-for-profit stature. And basically the not-for-profits were saying, hey, we don't necessarily have the skill in place, but we have a little bit of funding. How can we work together to maximize our programs and services for our clients?
Sure.
So we started to pair up. And
That's awesome.
we started to partner with places like Autism Ontario and specific chapters within Ontario. We started to partner with the Canadian Armed Forces, who said, we've got children whose parents have post-traumatic stress disorder. Children need to be equipped with how to engage their parents, and we don't know how to do that through recreation, but you guys do. So can you develop a program and run it, and can we create a building capacity piece within that to train our staff so that moving forward they can do more goal-driven programs? Sure. So that's the evolution of Rec Respite in a nutshell, the one-to-one services, then the group programs. Then I became, word spreads fast, the grapevine grows stronger.
That's awesome.
And I was asked to go to the Middle East as an expert in this field. And I was asked to go and speak and teach as well at an adult day center that they have in Kuwait City, which is on our website. All of this stuff is on our website.
Sure.
And my role there was to build capacity again. So teach the staff there what to do with their clients based on their clients' needs, abilities, interests, and strengths, because they were still doing Duplo puzzles and primary blocks. Right?
Sure.
And these individuals that I was working with in the Gulf War were those of children of the Gulf War.
Oh, wow.
So there were lots of complex needs. We had deformities, we had complex mental health, we had comorbidity issues, and lots of developmental issues. So they really they had great intentions and a beautiful program, but their staff just weren't equipped with the recreation and leisure piece at all.
Got you. So
we started to do more of that international work.
No, I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah.
No, keep going. Sorry, I keep cutting you off.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So that's sort of where the international work started. And all the while we were still managing our group partners, and we're running programs for, like the town of Newmarket. They have like a YMCA setting, but they don't have programs for special needs kids, right? So they said, hey, let's bring you guys in. You run your programs out of our facility. Let's make this work and make it accessible. So we're creating accessible communities as well. And this is a really big, important thing, which then started to evolve into more of the accessibility and inclusion work that I've been embarking on internationally and a little bit more closer to home as of late over the past 3 or 4 years now.
Sure.
So that work is basically taking all the premise and all the ideas and all the tools that we use with our clients and their families every day and empowering others with that knowledge. So now we're able to go and train summer camp staff how to identify invisible special needs like mental health, anxiety disorders, sensory processing disorders, all of these things that they're starting to see, but they're not equipped with how to deal with these kids, how to work with them. So we thought, this is interesting because we do this every day.
Sure.
So why not bring this knowledge to them? This is what you might see in your camps. This is how to redirect them. This is how to engage them. Here's some tools to use, to physically use, that can help you so that you can successfully include these kids in all of your programming.
Sure. So
that's been the accessibility and inclusion work that we've been doing.
So how much of this, are you guys leveraging any technology with this, or how do you guys kind of, like, what kind of tools are they? Are they kind of like physical things, or is it using some technology, or what exactly kind of are the tools?
So some of the tools for this particular work is lots of visual aids. Mm-hmm. So using, like, we've created cue cards, and we're using PECS, which is a pictorial education card. So it helps them use the card to identify what it is that you're asking of them. You know, if they're nonverbal, if there's communication boundaries, or challenges for whatever reason. But Recreational Respite did embark on developing an app, excitingly enough. Now, the app that we've created allows for individuals to use the app. So say they're families or professionals who are working with these kids and families. They can basically type in their geographic area and the age of child that maybe they have as a parent and their needs and what their interests are. And the app will notify them every time a program pops up in their community under that criteria.
That's very cool.
So the app is still in process. So we're about a year and a half in to the app. So of course, as you know, it takes time.
Yep.
And it's sort of in its own testing phase right now, but it will be free to use.
Okay.
And because we're a Canadian-based company, the programs listed will be Canadian-based. However, the resources listed will be accessible by anyone all over the world.
That's awesome. No, I think
so
that's
anyone
great.
can, yeah.
And the thing that I always kind of found fascinating about kind of you when we first connected was you're kind of like, you're not really in the tech space at all, but to your point, like you're building an app, you're kind of helping people, you're giving back, you're an entrepreneur, you're doing a startup, you're caring about accessibility. And I want to kind of get back to the accessibility thing in a second, but you're doing a lot of kind of mentoring as well. And so kind of how did you get into that? And maybe, do you want to maybe cover a little bit of the companies that you've been kind of mentoring?
So I think, again, because we are a for-profit social enterprise organization, we had a great deal of walls.
Okay.
The barriers around working with not-for-profits and for-profits. There are still a great many silos.
Sure.
And those silos, unfortunately, exist, but they create a barrier to accessible programming.
Sure.
And that's the unfortunate part. So for me, because this is totally a socially based program and service, we try to make services as accessible without the dollar factor as possible. And the best way to do that was to partner with organizations that need the expertise but don't. Like they don't have it, but they have to. But it's part of their mandate to provide certain programs and services as well, right?
Sure.
So to then partner with them, like the Canadian military, out of one of their bases, they say, we've got staff to run it, but they're not necessarily equipped to identify some of the evolving needs of their participants. So it's and then the Salvation Army, we worked with them for a little bit as well. Same thing.
Nice.
And these are teams of like developmental service workers and social service workers. These are people that are educated and have skills, but their focus isn't on recreation and leisure, right? Their focus is on a different avenue of life skills. And life skills is very critical, of course. So that's why we partner. This is not a competitive edge at all. This is completely a collaborative approach. That's how we would hope anyone would see it. Yeah. So that's how we would form those partnerships and say, hey, we have this set of expertise and skills. Are you interested in having your team members have more of these same tools and or more programs so that your members are accessing you even more? Because we're at such a loss right now, right? Not-for-profits are losing even more funding. They're doing even less. Leaving these families to nothing. There's no other options for them.
No,
It's a problem,
I
right?
totally agree. That's interesting. So, do you
Hmm.
charge them to work with them, or does it depend, or how do you guys kind of, obviously fund yourself?
Yeah, so we have like either a flat rate. So we'll
Hmm.
say to the organization, hey, for this flat rate, we'll run a program for 8 weeks. And
Okay,
that 8 week program will include all of the materials, our staff, a training component,
I got you.
um, and you open it up to your clients. And sometimes they'll say, well, you can open it up to yours as well, because of course our clients are often good prospects for them, right?
Sure.
For future, for their programs. So we'll open it up, and within that, we'll get enough people to run the program. And then either they'll fund the flat rate per session, which could be as little as $150 a session.
Nice.
Right? I mean, it's super cheap, and they can have up to 10 to 15 people in that session.
Sure.
So there's lots of opportunity here. And then the training part is part of that. So they can include their volunteers, their students, their staff, whoever, anyone that's working with their members, anyone can take part and get the tools that they need.
Sure. No, that's
So
great.
that's how we fund it. Yeah.
No, that's great. So, you mentioned kind of earlier that you actually do a lot of kind of mentoring. Do you maybe kind of want to talk a bit about what you do for or and help with people, and kind of why you decided to actually become a mentor?
So I have such a passion for entrepreneurship.
Sure.
I absolutely love the avenues that, I've loved the journey with all of its, good, bad, and ugly. But I've loved the journey of being an entrepreneur. And I think that, my opportunity came about. I moved into a new community, and I absolutely love the community. And they've got some really innovative youth startup company programs. And so they were looking for mentors. So I sent my bio and I said, hey, I'm really passionate about this. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm in my 10th year of business myself, of which I founded. I pioneered this idea because nothing like what I do kind of exists
Sure.
as its own entity. So I said I'd really like to get involved, and I'd like to volunteer my time. So it is purely volunteer.
Nice.
And I mentor up to, at any one given time, anywhere from 4 to 10 mentees, young businesses, who are basically starting up, a variety of businesses, ranging from canine academies to microbreweries to live aquarium retail stores. And these kids, I say kids because some of them are as young as 15 years old.
That's awesome.
And some of them are, 33 or 35 years old.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's pretty awesome. And my role as their mentor is we meet at least once a month. That's part of their mandate, or more,
Okay.
which is usually more.
Sure. Yeah.
And we get together and talk about what their plan is, what their vision is, and I help them nurture that. And I absolutely love that, because there's nothing cooler than seeing the energy of that kind of vibe. It's pretty cool.
Totally.
I wish I could do that full time.
Maybe one day, right?
At this point. Yeah, one day when I'm retired, if I ever retire, which probably isn't going to happen. But yeah, I love the mentorship role. And I think that it's so great to be able to empower these kids. I'm also a certified adult educator.
Okay.
So for me, the teaching component is I love teaching. It's the advocacy part is me that I absolutely love. That's my favorite part of my role as an entrepreneur, for sure. Teaching others.
No, that's great. So I kind of
Yeah.
want to go back to the accessibility thing for a second. Is there a bunch of things that kind of maybe not necessarily people that are building kind of software or kind of hardware, but is there kind of things that the average person that maybe doesn't think about this stuff on a day-to-day basis that you could maybe mention that they should maybe pay attention to or start thinking about, just kind of almost just kind of better off themselves and kind of understand where some people are kind of coming from, that, kind of just bring some awareness to some things that maybe people don't think about on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, accessibility is critical. The biggest thing I would say with regards to accessibility is not the bricks and mortar of buildings
Okay.
And not even necessarily the recent, which is here in Ontario, of course, not necessarily everywhere, but what we have here is the AODA,
Yeah.
right? It's the Ontario Disabilities Act. There's something similar in every province in the country.
Yeah.
But that revolves mostly around compliance. The stuff that I'm working on is more around the psychosocial needs. So how do we identify as a small business, let's say, the evolving needs of my customers? How do I know that when Mrs. Smith comes in at 90 years old and she gives me 5 cents instead of 10 cents, that she's experiencing possibly some dementia? And how do I redirect out of that when she's struggling? Like, how do I engage her effectively, right? So with regards to people who are getting possibly involved in the tech component of accessibility, I really see it as necessary as people addressing the emotional, psychosocial needs of these changes in the community from an accessibility perspective, if that makes sense.
No, I think that makes sense, because part of me, like, I guess I see it as like a lot of kind of maybe older people sometimes, maybe they've never had a computer and their first kind of interaction with the internet might be through, like, say, an iPad, or, you know, they like FaceTime with their grandkids. And, you know, like, my kids, obviously grandparents and whatnot, they both FaceTime sometimes. And my kids are fortunate enough that all their grandparents kind of live around, like, in the city, but sometimes they travel to, because they have a lake lot in another province, but so they still kind of FaceTime. But it's interesting just to kind of watch different age groups interact with technology, and kind of how some things that you're just like are so simple can be such a challenge to somebody that maybe doesn't come from a tech background, or the internet's kind of their, you know, their first device was maybe an iPhone or an iPad or both, right? And so I know what you mean. And here's the other thing. I don't know. I also did some mentoring, and I take in a lot of students who are working on their final year in software engineering. Oh, interesting.
And so sometimes, like, that's actually how we had our app developed, was a small group from the Capstone project.
Nice.
And they were responsible for creating the app. They picked us. We had to submit sort of what we wanted them to do.
Right.
And they picked sort of our goal, because they loved what we were trying to create in terms of programs that were accessible to this particular clientele, right, and their families.
Sure.
So they developed the app for us, like utilizing students' expertise around that. And then I kind of mentored them with respect to this part of the business, because they're techie, but they're not necessarily in the healthcare world, right? So they're like, well, I can build this for you, but, like, what's it going to do? How's it going to help people?
Sure.
So I would suggest, I mean, we need more accessible programs, meaning that we need things to be accessible on the computer or otherwise for people and their families. But a lot of families, like, if we could create something for their families, caregivers themselves, to access, to help navigate systems, to help identify structure, because we have a lot of families that act out of crisis too, right? And once you're in crisis, you don't remember step 1, 2, and 3, right?
Sure.
You just need to know how to get to step 3, and they're going through so much at the same time that they don't remember. So if somebody could create something like that, technology-wise, where a user could actually click in, you know, to a program and say, hey, this is what's going on with me, and it kind of spits out the answer based on where they live, you know, what their options might be, how to navigate the system. That would be incredible.
That's interesting.
Just throwing it out there to maybe you. I don't know.
I think that's interesting, right? Because but that's partly why I really wanted to have you on the show, is to get people kind of thinking in that space, right? Because I think like a lot of people, and not necessarily just young people, they're like, they want to be the next, like, Snapchat, for example, right? And it's like, well, sure, you're basically just building a distraction app. It's not really making your life better or lives of other people better, right? Like, it's just filling time. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't mean it in, like, a negative way, but I like having people on the show like yourself that are, you know, actually trying to help people, right? And so, and just kind of like, if just this show can inspire somebody to think, like, you know what, like, my grandparents struggle with this thing, and I could build a little app that did this or that, and it would help. Like, I think that would be awesome, right? I think that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Well, and I'd love to be involved if any of your listeners or yourself or however this works out, definitely. Because have you heard of like dementia hacks and things like that? Have you heard of the big hack fests at all? Do you have those in Alberta? Okay, so here in Ontario, we have these amazing things called Hacker Nest.
Okay.
And Hacker Nest changes to different topics. So we recently just had Dementia Hack. And Dementia Hack is a bunch of software students. I don't know the technical terms, sorry. That's totally out of my realm. But basically they come together, they sign up, they volunteer their time. It's 3 days of basically no sleep and all but create. And for the Dementia Hack, it was building tools for caregivers to use. And at the end of the Dementia Hack, somebody wins, but there's a panel of judges that helps decide who wins. And whoever wins gets a bunch of money to then further their app development specifically to what they were competing for in the Dementia Hack. But there's also like other hacks, like there's like Autism Hack, and there was... okay, it's not coming to me now, but so they're hosting these. So Hacker Nest is the company, and they're Canadian, and they're hosting these different hacks around the world.
That's awesome.
And bringing out all kinds of people to create new technology-based solutions. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
No, that's really great. But sadly, Amy, we're
I was a neighbor for that too. Yeah. No. So I was a mentor for that as well, and helped them build ideas as to what they should build. So yeah, definitely would get involved with more of that.
No, that's great. But sadly, we're coming to the end of the show. So let's maybe close with where people can get more information about yourself and the company online.
Sure. So our website is full of great information. It's www.recrespite.com. So it's RECRES as in Sam, P for Peter, ITE.com.
Perfect, Amy. Well, I really appreciate taking the time into your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.